When it comes to horse racing, you can never have too much information. With twinspires, you can place your bets with confidence, whether you use handicapping insights like our Brisnet speed ratings, prime power and past performances, the guidance of our experts' top picks, or just choose a name that catches your eye. Yes! No matter how you pick your horse, bet with twinspires. And now you can race to victory with twinspires tournaments.
Welcome back to the Twinspires Racing Roundtable. I'm Ashley Anderson here with James Scully and Vance Hanson to recap the Virginia Derby and Oaks, the first ever Derby prep races in Virginia this past weekend at Colonial Downs. We'll also look at the top news and notes from around the country and look ahead to the Louisiana Derby and Jeff Ruby Stakes this coming weekend. Of course, I wanted to mention real quickly our spring meet tickets and Derby week tickets are on sale at KentuckyDerby.com. And with that, let's jump right into Colonial Downs. James, I'll start with you today and begin with the Virginia Derby, won by American Promise, a little bit of an upset there at 7-1 for Wayne Lucas. So what were your thoughts on the Virginia Derby?
I liked American Promise's performance. He got out of the gate better than he did in his two previous stakes attempts at Fairgrounds and Oaklawn Park. And, you know, the race favorite, the odds-on favorite, Bob Baffert trained Getaway Car, broke on top. But Nick Juarez took over the mount and got him out of the gate better. American Promise out of the gate better. Got up and dueled. We'll see right here. He's coming on the outside of the pace setter. Got up to duel on the front end with Getaway Car. And basically started to put him away on the far turn. He began to edge away on the far turn, and he just continued to draw off in the stretch. And, you know, obviously the final time's 146 a change. It's a new track record. That 1.125 distance on the main track has not been run a ton of times. I think 25 times ever since the track opened. But, you know, the one thing that was impressive to me, you know, you see a performance like this and a front runner on perhaps a track that's playing favorable to his style. He's still got to get a figure. And American Promise got a 105 Brisnet speed rating for this 7-length victory. And I will say that the thing about like moving forward is the competition is going to get a lot deeper. You know, the track, like I said, played favorably to the speed. But there is this factor where sometimes these D. Wayne Lucas 3-year-olds just come to hand and they just carry their form forward. I remember when Charismatic, you know, he got beat a mile. I mean, he was drilled in the San Antonio Derby and was going nowhere. And all of a sudden, he ran a fast race in the Lexington and beat a real soft field, but he ran a fast race beating him. And then he wins the Kentucky Derby in his next start. And I remember last year, we saw Seize the Gray. He ran in his first 2 stakes attempts and did nothing. And in his third stakes attempt, just like American Promise is making his third stakes attempt last Saturday, Seize the Gray wins the Pat Day Mile real impressively. So sometimes these horses come to hand and they can carry their form forward. Off that Pat Day Mile win last year, Seize the Gray came right back and won the Preakness Stakes. So I know that American Promise still has something to prove against better competition and on a track that might play more fair. But that was a real fast race, and it was a real strong performance, and he has something going for him exiting the Virginia Derby, I think. I'll also mention real quick, I thought Render Judgment, he also improved upon his previous stakes attempts for Kenny McPeak. And once again, it's a matter for him just getting out of the starting gate. He had been unable to get out of his previous stakes efforts, starting gate in his previous stakes efforts. He got out of the gate much better in the Virginia Derby, stalked the pace in third down the back stretch, and wound up being a length clear in second. So it was an encouraging effort as well for the runner-up, but American Promise, I thought, you know, looked great, and we'll see if he can carry his form forward, Vance.
Yeah, I thought the win was eye-catching on the surface, perhaps not so much under closer scrutiny. I mean, you mentioned how the track was playing favorably towards speed, or at least horses are running close to the lead, if not on the lead. And I think most people would have recognized going into the race that the odds-on favorite Getaway Car, he was going to be distance limited just on the way he's been tiring, going 1.16 miles length and his run style. So when all was said and done, American Promise really got a perfect pressing trip in this race. And, uh, turning for home, he took over from Getaway Car around the far turn, started opening up, and there was really not the kind of quality competition able to make a race of it for him in the stretch. So, uh, somewhat biased racetrack helped this horse. The quality of the competition helped this horse, and of course, you mentioned the mile and an eighth track record. Uh, not and you mentioned the small sample of races run over the 1 turn mile and an eighth at Colonial. There is certainly not a race of this quality ever run at that distance at that track. So that also helped him set the track record. You also brought up Charismatic, a good point. Charismatic in 1999, he jumped out of nowhere 2 weeks before the Derby, won a fast edition of the Lexington. I at this point, I just don't think American Promise's performance in this race is up quite to that level in my estimation. But he could prove us wrong come Derby time.
So it's kind of a difficult horse to figure out. It took 6 tries to break his maiden. He did that in gate-to-wire fashion over a muddy track at Oaklawn. And then with this win at 7 3/4, he got a 105 Bristnet speed figure, a huge number there. Getaway Car did get the early lead, but the whole thought was a contested pace could affect that horse, and it did in this race. He faded to finish a distant 4th. And so I don't know if we'll see him show up in another Derby prep race after this, but of course a big disappointment for Bob Baffert and Connections, being the only horse they shipped to Colonial this weekend. And then with Winter Judgment, like you said, James, adding blinkers for the first time, he raced closer to the pace in this race, and it did seem to help him out here. Finishing second, he had a triple-digit E2 rating in the race as well, and I thought we saw a better Winter Judgment in the Virginia Derby. As far as American Promise in the Kentucky Derby, does have enough points now, added 50 with this win in the Virginia Derby, and so could make the starting gate. And it was also interesting that Nick Juarez picked up the mount here. I believe, he actually picked up the mount as well in the Oaks race because Brian Hernandez couldn't make it to Colonial Downs because of an issue with the planes. So Nick Juarez had a big day at Colonial, but he was the 7th rider from 9 starts for American Promise, and maybe will retain the mount for the Derby. But as far as whether this is a true contender for the Kentucky Derby, I still am not completely sold, just considering if you look at his overall resume from 9 starts, it's kind of all over the place. He was in the Risen Star, finished 5th by 13 lengths to Magnitude, and then had this big showing today, but very unique, or not today, but on Saturday, very unique circumstances, that 1 turn mile and an eighth. So gonna exercise caution going forward in the Kentucky Derby. Let's move over to the Oaks race, and Fawn Lee in her second career start, now 2 for 2, won the Virginia Oaks and 50 points toward the Kentucky Oaks. So Vance, what did you think about Fawn Lee?
Yeah, second-time starter in the Oaks. She had broken her maiden at Tampa Bay Downs first out, and she was heavily favored in this race, which is kind of an indication of the quality and depth of this race. This was just another victory like American Promise that was done on or near the front end over a track that was favoring that running style, and she gutted out the win at the end. The race came back pretty slow on the speed ratings. I believe it was an 81 Bristnet speed rating. Other fillies contending for the Oaks have run much faster. And at this point, I'll just succinctly say that I wouldn't suspect she's a legitimate Oaks contender without running a faster prep race in the interim. And that's only if the Connections do decide to go on to the Kentucky Oaks. It would be a tough spot, I think, for a third-time starter facing the likes of Good Cheer and some really other good 3-year-old fillies around the country.
Not to mention she hasn't run 2 turns yet. So if we don't see her in a prep before the Kentucky Oaks, first time racing 2 turns.
Yeah,
James,
I think that's a fair point about running in a. I mean, if she's going to go to the Kentucky Oaks field, I do think that another prep would benefit her. I will say this about Fawn Lee: if she broke on top in this race and she has a clear lead right out of the starting gate, and this Anonymia McPeak's filly, came up and went by her and was actually, led all the way through the turn and into the stretch. And that filly had won a allowance 2 starts back that had a bunch of stakes horses or horses that had run in stakes previously in that race. She was coming off the Honeybee. She had a ton more seasoning than I thought Fondly, who had only run once. So I liked the way she showed a lot of courage to win this race and prevail, because she was, doing all the dirty work when she was chasing the pace setter, Anonymous, on the far turn and into the stretch. And then the runner-up early on, who ran second, she was another last out maiden winner. So those are, to me, lightly raced fillies that still have potential to get faster and come on and be decent stakes types moving forward. But like Vance said, I mean, that the speed rating, the metrics, tell the real story of these prep races. And just getting an 81 speed rating was a little disappointing for Fondly.
I was a little bit more impressed with her debut and just the trouble she had to overcome, and then to get up to win by 4 lengths at Tampa Bay Downs with the 7 furlong win. But then here at a mile and a 16th, a little bit easier. There was a scratch of Gal's Delight, the morning line favorite, and then Anonymous did get that early lead here, her stablemate. But I was a little bit more from the Virginia Oaks, taking away the performance of Early On, who was the horse I was trying to get the win with in this race, but had that closing kick, a 97 late pace rating, and was beaten a half length, but with more ground, like a mile and 1/8 in Kentucky Oaks. Maybe Early On is a more serious contender stretching out for the Kentucky Oaks race for Saffie Joseph.
Yeah, and she did make ground off the pace, so you have to give her credit. I mean, she was pretty far back on the backside early on. Now, granted, the horses in front of her might have been struggling a little bit, but just to close ground on that track, it was an encouraging thing, for looking at her moving forward.
We normally leave what else caught your eye from the weekend toward the end, but we'll do this in the middle because we're looking ahead to the Louisiana Derby and Jeff Ruby Stakes. So, Vance, I'll start with you on what else caught your eye as far as performances from the weekend.
Well, I'll bring up the feature at Oaklawn on Saturday, the Whitmore Stakes for 3-year-olds and up sprinters. And Booth is the latest in the long string of Steve Asmussen trained quality sprinters. Booth is finally starting to put things together, and this victory in the Whitmore on Saturday was the first time he's put back-to-back wins together in his career. He's been a hot and cold type, either winning or finishing up the track. So this is an encouraging progression by Booth. And he earned a second consecutive 105 Brisnet speed rating, winning the Whitmore. So he's going in the right direction. I mentioned, this isn't the latest in a long string of sprinters trained by Steve Asmussen that have achieved notoriety around the country. He's probably not going to emulate the very best one, which I think was his sire Matoli, who Asmussen also trained. But undoubtedly, his connections hope that he can carry his form outside of Oaklawn the rest of the season, which his stablemate Scully wasn't quite able to do last season. But Scully is back in training at Fairgrounds, and so Steve Asmussen's going to have a job on his hands to keep both Booth and Scully separated in the spring and summertime. But 2 quality sprinters for the rest of the year for Steve Asmussen.
And that was the first graded win for Booth and for Eric Asmussen, who won the Eclipse Award for Apprentice Jockey last year.
And I agree with what Vance said. I mean, listen, I looked at that race, and there was a chance he was going to regress. I think a person could make an argument off of that comebacker race. And to say, I mean, to me, I'm looking at it more positively for Booth, where he's turned a corner and is coming on. I mean, if you ask me, Scully or Booth moving forward, I'm all in the Booth corner because he's got upside. So I came away, I liked his effort. As far as what else caught my eye, I'll mention a pair of Brad Cox. Brad Cox shipped. He had Rapture in the Virginia Derby, and he didn't run very well in his stakes debut, but he shipped he actually shipped 3 maidens with Rapture to Colonial Downs, and 2 of them were first-time starters, 3-year-old colts. And they ran in race 5 and 6, and they both won by more than 6 lengths. I thought looked really good doing so. I'll start with Lion of Justice. He was in race 5 on Saturday. This is a mile maiden special weight, and he showed speed from the gate, took a short lead down the back stretch and on the turn, and just really draws off through the stretch. He's was a $1.1 million purchase by End of Mischief, a Dark Bay colt, and he got a solid 88 Brisnet speed rating for this debut win at a mile on Saturday. Then one race later, Verifier, a son of son of Authentic, and you'll see him just slingshotting to the lead, like Travis Stone said. He went 6 furlongs in this 6 furlong maiden race in race 6. Verifier did, and he didn't break on top like Lion of Justice. In fact, he was 4th at the first call. He made a 4 wide move on the far turn, and then took over in the stretch and drew off pretty sharply. I mean, he ran 6 furlongs at 108.14, got a 93 Brisnet speed rating. So he's a horse, like I said, a son of Authentic that sold for $1 million as a 2-year-old in training. So encouraging debut performances by Lion of Justice and Verifier, and we'll see where they go next for Brett Cox.
I'm a little disappointed we didn't show your stall hit, James. A nice little walk and talk around all of Brad Cox's horses at Colonial Downs. If you haven't seen it, check it out on our social channels. It was very well done.
Thanks.
And I will mention Pool 5 of the Kentucky Derby Future Wager closed on Sunday at 6 p.m. as well as the Lone Oaks Pool. And I'm curious to get your all's thoughts real quick after I talk through some of the horses that came through in favoritism. But we had Journalism close at 5-1, opened at 3-1. And then Sovereignty, who was coming off that Fountain of Youth win. I was a little surprised. Ended up taking a little bit more money than Citizen Bull, who I thought just had slightly more impressive resume. But Citizen Bull was the third choice at 9-1, of course, for Bob Baffert. And then you had all other 3-year-olds at 10-1. And then Cole Battle came in, who, has a couple stakes wins to his resume as well. And Barnes now no longer the favorite in these pools, because we've seen him taking a lot of money in the first couple pools for the Kentucky Derby Future Wager. The Oaks pool, really no surprise. The Good Cheer was a heavy favorite there. And then Tenma came in second choice, I believe around 7-1. I think I had it listed. So not much to say with the Oaks wager, because that's kind of where I would put my money to, even though you're not getting a great price on Good Cheer. But as far as the Derby Future Wager, did you all see any interesting value? Did you all have a chance to look through the final odds?
I was surprised that Barnes drifted up. I still thought he would get bet, maybe not as low as Journalism, but Sovereignty and, even All Others was a shorter price than Barnes. And I'll tell you, Colt, I saw him taking money on Friday. I mean, Disruptor. I mean, I don't know what his, where he ranked. I think he was like the 8th choice. I mean, this is the son of Uncle Mo coming off a convincing maiden win at Gulfstream Park. He's going to a stakes race for Rapoli, and it looked like to me that Rapoli and his people were betting him. So I'd be watching for him, because I've been saying, hey, I mean, we're at the point where I still think somebody can come along late in the game and make a mark. So that was one horse I saw that got bet down. I was a little surprised what he closed at, Disruptor. And as far as the Oaks go, I made a wager on Mahima. I mean, if you're against Good Cheer, that was a time to bet because she took all the money. And I think Mahima is a candidate to bounce back in her next prep. And if she does, she'll be much shorter priced than whatever she closed at, 12-1 or 15-1 or whatever it was.
Vance, did you put any money down on this Pool 5?
I did not, but the odds on Citizen Bull I thought were pretty interesting at the end, especially vis-a-vis Bill Mott's horse, who Sovereignty, thank you, who started at was let go at 7-1 here. So I thought Citizen Bull offered a little more value in this pool compared to Sovereignty for sure.
Yeah, I agree.
And
then, of course, there's some horses in here that we'll see this weekend for Louisiana Derby, Jeff Ruby Stakes, and we'll look ahead now to those 2 Derby prep races. But before we talk about that, I did want to mention we have the Bayou Bluegrass Pick 5, so kind of a crossover here with You've got the races over at Fairgrounds this Saturday, as well as the races at Turfway Park, a low 15% takeout, mandatory payout on that $1 wager. So you can see the list of stakes there, or the races that you'll be covering in that Bayou Bluegrass Pick 5. We also have a Bayou Bluegrass Day 15% profit boost at twinspires as well on winning win exacted trifecta and superfecta wagers. And let's start with, let's see, the Louisiana Derby, the Grade 2 Louisiana Derby. James, what were your initial thoughts when you saw the field here?
Well, when I looked at the field, my initial thoughts are there's plenty of pace on paper in this field. It doesn't always materialize like that. And quite often, I think there's like a bunch of speed in a race and they basically just sort themselves out and aren't doing up front, and there's not that much pace. But the fact of the matter is John Hancock's 2 for 2. And anybody that watched the Tampa Bay Derby and showed the high speed that Owen Almighty showed that day should realize that Owen Almighty could not beat John Hancock to the lead in the Sam F. Davis. He's never been headed. He's set the pace at both races, run real fast fractions. I don't see any way in the world he's not going to break running from the rail. And then you've got Yenzer, who was going nowhere racing off the pace, and they gunned him hard for the lead last time, and he recorded a real sharp maiden win. He's committed to sending hard, I think, when the gates open. I look at this Caldera. This is a wire-to-wire maiden winner for Lucas, who was all over the track running second by nose in the Sunland Derby. They're putting these 58-1 workouts in him. I mean, he's going to be prominent. And then you've got this wild card who's drawn outside all the other speed in Furio, who's like a 6 furlong maiden special weight winner who's run 21 and change in previous starts. So we'll see if he plays havoc, if he gets out of the gate or not. But I think the race, I'm interested in Instant Replay, who rallied off the pace to record, I thought, a superb allowance win last time out. I mean, you talk about a horse that turned things around in a spectacular fashion. I thought it was this Instant Replay. He comes rolling up here and blows right by Furio, who had set the pace. This is Furio. Once again, he's out there winging it in this allowance. Nobody can run with him early. And we'll see Instant Replay. I just think this is a great prep race for this. He's going to utilize the exact same run style. And then Hypnus. Hypnus was a terrific off-the-pace debut winner on the comped undercard. Had a terrible trip last time. It was a really a little bit of a sneaky effort, and he's going to be running late with Brian Hernandez. So I see Instant Replay and Hypnus getting the right setup. We'll see if they're good enough.
Vance, what about you?
I agree with James about Instant Replay. Of the two Brad Cox horses, John Hancock is going to take more money, but this stakes newcomer looks like the one to watch at a better price. He hasn't been the most consistent colt so far, and he was actually, Cox ran him twice for a 6-figure claiming tag already in his career, so that probably an early indication of what he thought of him initially, but you got to take him seriously now after that 5-length allowance win, as James said, and like he said, the pace is going to be pretty honest, seemingly on paper, and a 1 3/16 is just going to hit him between the eyes. So I would agree Instant Replay is the horse to probably give a long, hard look at in the Louisiana Derby.
And I'll just say one thing. The Gary and Mary West owned Maxim Security. They ran him in a maiden $15,000 claimer in December at Gulfstream, and they got away with it. He won by 10 plus lengths, and again, it didn't get claimed. And then they have this son of Into Mischief, and like Vance said, they're running him in maiden high price claiming races, and they got away with not doing it. But he wasn't in the Kentucky Derby Pool 5 of the Future Wager last weekend because he didn't get nominated. He ran poorly in a real salty allowance against Sandman in December at Oaklawn. He ran 4th or 5th. And they didn't nominate him. So they'll make a $6,000 payment by April 2nd or 3rd or whatever the deadline is if he runs like I think he will. I think he'll run well on Saturday. Instant Replay.
John Hancock, now I'm seeing the odds for the first time, actually, because when I looked earlier, we didn't have the morning line, but 7-2 here was almost going to show up in the Virginia Derby this past weekend. Certainly going to be a pace factor here. And Also interesting chunk of gold coming out of that second. The Risen Star was 43-1, I believe, that day, and now getting a little bit better price, or well, not better for betters, but for
A
for
little
him
bit of
personally, getting
respect.
more respect at 8-1.
Yeah.
But we won't have magnitude, of course, coming from the Risen Star because he's now sidelined. But we're seeing Yinzer, who got his maiden win on that Risen Star undercard, and he's 12-1. This was a horse I talked to Steve Asmussen about before Yinzer's debut. There was a lot of excitement about this horse. He was a $1 million yearling purchase, but took a while to get going. So I'm curious to see how he performs in his first stakes try, because I was expecting him to break his maiden a little bit sooner than what it took for him to do it last month in the Risen Star undercard. And then same with American Promise, was in the Risen Star, but showed up at Colonial Downs this past weekend. So now we're seeing Caldera for Dwayne Lucas. But also with Hypnus, 10-1, a little bit of value potentially there. I talked to Kenny McPeak at Colonial Downs. He was in town on Saturday to watch Render Judgment and to also watch him. And I also want to ask about Hypnus and the Louisiana Derby. Tell me about his chances.
Well, this is a horse that I think could shove himself right in the top level of the Derby picture. His race in the Rebel was a race that was very marred. I mean, he got stopped 3 times, never really got a chance to make his run. On the gallop out, he collared the winner. I think you're going to see Hypnus, shoved to the top of the list in this weekend or next weekend.
Excited to see it, and best of luck today.
Thank you so much.
Big prediction there. So we will see what happens on Saturday at the fairgrounds. Let's move over to the Grade 3 Jeff Ruby Stakes, and we'll have a few coming out of that John Battaglia, including the winner, California Burrito. Vance, what were your initial thoughts on the Jeff Ruby field?
A couple horses of interest to me at this stage. Baby Max, the runner-up in the John Battaglia Memorial. He's run it well at Turfway all winter long. Generally not getting the benefit of any pace help either, and especially that was the case when California Burrito loped along on an uncontested slow-pace lead in the Battaglia. But that doesn't figure to be an issue in Saturday's race. It looks like plenty of pace was entered. And I noticed trainer Kelsey Danner is adding blinkers to his repertoire, and he's worked a bullet half mile, presumably wearing them in advance of this race. So I expect Baby Max to run another good race at Turfway. I'd also take a look at another horse, Whit Beckman trained Flying Mohawk, who enters off back-to-back allowance wins over the grass. He inherited the lead in his only prior stakes attempt in the Pilgrim at Aqueduct last fall. He was still a maiden at the time, and that's just not his style, running on the lead. It's better as a closer, and if he can transfer this really good grass form he's shown of late to the synthetic Tapeta surface, he could grab a share more.
James, what do you think?
Well, I'm attracted by a couple, I think, off the pace types in the Ruby as well. I mean, there's not as much pace as like the Louisiana Derby on paper, but getting Innovator and even this Charlie's to blame for Peter Yurton, getting them in the field really is going to add, I think, pace to the race that the John Battaglia Memorial just did not have. I mean, that was as glacial as it gets. They almost went 50 seconds opening half mile. And I'll tell you right now, Maximum Promise, Kenny McPeak, once again, we talked about Hypnus last race, but Maximum Promise last year at Ellis Park broke his maiden by 14 lengths. And if you watch that replay of that race, he looked fantastic. Wasn't seen again until the Lecomte. He got mired with a inside post. He was inside the whole way on that sticky, wet track, and he got beat 2.5 lengths in 5th that day. That was a sneaky effort from off the pace. He came back last time in the John Battaglia, and he just got stopped right at the start. I mean, he broke in a tangle and had nowhere to go and was away slowly. And I thought he made a really good run for 3rd. I think he's advancing. I think he's finally going to get set up. He started off the layoff. I think Maximum Promise is going to get the right setup. And I'm a little intrigued by this final gambit of Cox. I don't know how much he's going to get bet off this maiden win, but this is a late runner who looks like he's got some potential to me. So I'm looking at Maximum Promise and Final Gambit for the Jeff Ruby Stakes.
I'm with you, looking off the pace here. And as you mentioned, we saw California Burrito get away with those slow fractions. And during that weekend, we saw the Cincinnati Trophy Stakes, especially on that card, that Friday card. There was a huge speed bias, early front runners. We saw almost every single race, gate to wire. Then the track played a little bit more true for that John Battaglia Memorial Stakes. Here, with Innovator, as you mentioned, a couple others in there, I think it's going to be maybe a hotter pace. And Poster, of course, was supposed to be in the John Battaglia and ended up scratching out, but now showing up in the Jeff Ruby. That's another horse that comes from off the pace. So one to look at, but certainly intriguing that we've got Kenny McPeak in there with Maximum Promise and Brad Cox as well entered in this race. So could be pretty competitive. Excited to see what happens.
Yeah, it's just great to see both these races. I mean, they both got big fields, and it's that time of year where, no surprise, because this is the Jeff Ruby Stakes. I mean, the last 3 years, you got a Derby winner, a Derby runner-up, and a Preakness winner, all running in the last 3 editions. So, this is a race that's got a little cachet here of late, and we can see it's popular at the entry box.
Yeah, 7 weeks away from the Derby, so time to get those points.
Yeah.
But that is all the time we have today for the Racing Roundtable. We will be back next Tuesday to recap these 2 stakes races we talked about and more. And of course, well, we're back on the road, James, in Louisiana in about 48 hours. So follow us at Twinspires with all of our on-site coverage this weekend at the fairgrounds. We'll see you next time.
When it comes to horse racing, you can never have too much information. With TwinSpires, you can place your bets with confidence, whether you use handicapping insights like our Brisnet speed ratings, prime power and past performances, the guidance of our experts' top picks, or just choose a name that catches your eye. Yes! No matter how you pick your horse, bet with TwinSpires. And now you can race to victory with TwinSpires tournaments.